The kitchen. Let's see if we find one in the kitchen. Let's speak about this afterwards. All right. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Brachas Perek Daled. We are in Halacha Aleph in the Ois for Hadars edition. We're going to be learning Daf Mem Daled. We left off on Daf Mem Gimel Amid Beis, mamash at the end of the Amid, my Tamo in the Rabbanon, and we are dedicating this class, firstly, in the merit of us being Matzliach, in taking back, in freeing, in redeeming all of the hostages, and for the Hatzlacha of our soldiers in annihilating our enemy. May that happen today. Amen. So first of all, we finished learning the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda, explaining why he holds that Shachrus can only be daven until the end of the fourth hour of the day. Now we have to explain the reason for the Chachamim's opinion, which is that you can daven Shachrus until Chatzois. Then we're going to learn the second machlokes we had on the Mishnah regarding Tfilas Mincha. As the machlokes between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda regarding Plag HaMincha. The Gemara is going to better define Plag HaMincha. The Gemara is going to have a discussion as to what should one daven if the time of Mincha and Musaf are together. You can daven both Mincha or Musaf. Which one would come first? And as they just explained the logic of one over the other. Mitzad Echad Musaf, the chiyuv of Musaf begins prior to Chatzois. Right, Musaf is after Shachris. The person daven Shachris 6 a.m. They can daven Musaf right afterwards. So the chiyuv begins first. Mitzad Sheni, Mincha is Tadir. Every day you have to daven Mincha. Tadir v'she'ena Tadir, Tadir Koydem. So we'll see which one should be daven first. We're going to speak a phenomenal Rabbi Yossi that we don't have in the Bavli, that compares Tfilas Mincha not to the Talmud Shel Beinu Arbayim, which is what we have been learning until now. Something amazing, guys, that Mincha is compared to the Ketores. As we will see, we're going to have a discussion in the Gemara, Pashat stories. Both Tanoim and Amoraim, when did they daven Mincha? What would be the optimum time of davening Mincha? And if we'll have time, the final topic will be as to, do you daven Mincha? Let's say this man is sunset, the ideal time. Let's say the ideal time is Plaga Mincha. Whatever. Is it from where you are? Or is it Cincinnati, it's Yisrael, it's that time? So therefore in Bavel, they would daven, even though Bavel is more to the east. That's going to be a very interesting discussion. Really, it won't be something that we will learn explicitly in the Gemara, but that will be a machlokes between the Charedim and the Pnei Moshe, how to understand the Gemara. We'll leave it at that for the intro. And again, Daf Mem Gimel Amid Beis at the end of the Amid. You got it? Says the Gemara. We already explained the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. That's where we left off. Now asks the Gemara, my Taman the Rabbanon. My Taman means what will be the source that we find in Torah as to why do they hold that Shachris could be daven until Chatzois Hayoim. So answers the Gemara. In Parshas Pinchas, the Torah uses the words Shnayim Layoim. And Chevre, let's keep your finger on the Charedim. We're going to learn a lot of Charedim today. And as the Charedim says, 4 lines before the bottom of the Amid, the words Shnayim Layoim Kroy Yiseiruhu, it's extra, it's superfluous. Why? Because since the Torah says Es HaKeves Echad Tasav Aboikim, and the Es HaKeves Hasheni Tasav Ben Harbayim. So 1 + 1 = 2. Why do you have to write Shnayim Layoim? Daf Mem Dalad on the top. The answer is learns the Chachamim Chaloik Es Hayoim, which means divide the day into half. Meaning, look inside the Charedim on the top. Divide the day into half. Talmud Shel Shachar is to the half until Chatzois. Shel Bein Arbayim is Mechatzois V'ad Halayla. Gewaldik. That's the meaning of Shnayim Layoim. The day is divided into Chaloikes Hayoim, and each Talmud should be brought in its half. Not until the end of Shlish Hayoim, which is Shitas Rabbi Yehuda, but until the half of the day, which is until Chatzois. Gewaldik. Now, says the Gemara, my time of the Rabbi Yehuda. Meaning, Rabbi Yehuda obviously doesn't teach Shnayim Layoim Chaloikas Hayoim, but Shnayim Layoim is superfluous. So there must be some other limud that he learns from those externally not necessary words of Shnayim Layoim. And the Gemara actually is going to answer that there are many limudim that are learned, even Rabbi Yehuda, Shnayim Layoim, and even L'Chachamim. It's not teaching you only one thing. We learn many things. The only one limud that Rabbi Yehuda does not hold by is the Chaloikas Hayom. But let's see, what else do we learn from the Shnayim Layoim? So first, the pshat will be Shnayim Layoim, Choyva Layoim. Choyva Layoim, as the Charedim says, 5 lines from the top, that there is no tashlumin for the Talmud. Using the famous words, the Avar Yoimai Batal Karbanoi. You got to bring it on this day. And you can't make up for it. Parenthetically, by tefillos, there is the concept of tashlumin. Like we know that if a person b'shoigeg misses one tefillah, the next tefillah they daven 2 shmona esrei. But you don't find that by karbanos. Shnayim layoim. Okay, another pshat. Shnayim layoim. Shnei peraklitin layoim. There are 2 advocates per day. What does it mean? There are 2 advocates per day. Let's go back into Charedim. We're going to learn the Charedim the whole time. It's around 10 lines from the top. As it says in the Medrash, that loy lon adam Yerushalmi, that if a person would stay in Yerushalmi, they would never sleep ubeyadi oven, having a sin on their conscience, on their slave. Why? Because Talmud shel shachar mechaper alavin, from when shemetchilas halayla ad haboik. V'shal beinu arbayim mechaper ame haboiker ad ha'erev. In other words, a person was continuously forgiven through the Talmud. The only question is, okay, so Vlad is adding yet, so you don't get it for free. But I'm just bringing out why Dafka in Yerushalayim. I mean, the carbon Talmud was brought for all the Yidden. It came from the Shkalim. So why does the Medrash say Loilan Adam Yerushalayim? So you know what? I think me and you were coming to the same point. In other words, you have to make some avodah. You have to make some effort. Yerushalayim is on a mountain. You have to go up. If you make no avodah, time to sit good, God forbid, and to sin and to say I'm forgiven every day, it doesn't work that way. Okay, coming back over here. Another limit of Shnayim Layoim, says the Gemara, Shetehei Shechitasan L'Shem Hayoim. What does it mean, L'Shem Hayoim? Pasha, the din of Pigul. That when you bring it, says the Charedim, you have to have in mind when you're shechting it that you're going to bring the blood today. La'afuke Lizrei Damei L'Machar. Or having a kavana, I'm doing this part now, but I'm going to do the other part, which is the hakdid emurav l'machar. Even though we know pigul already befedish, the Torah says you can't do pigul, but that's the meaning of shnayim. Make sure you do it for today. Next, another limud, shnayim layoim, interesting limud. That should hey shchitasim keneged hayoim, that you have to shech the carbon tamid opposite the day, which means chavra in the rays of the sun. Now, first of all, kache has to be slaughtered to the northern part of the Mizbeach. Whoever has over here a picture, you can look at the picture. Kevan Aser, he might put the picture up. If not, we will be okay. So first of all, you had on the floor of the area of the Azara, mamish to the north of the Mizbeach, you had 24 rings, connected the 24 mishmares. Those rings were needed. That when you shech the carbon, ideally, you want to, so to say, restrict the animal in a specific place. It makes the shechita a lot easier. Actually, as really the carbon tamid, they use 2 rings, not only 1 ring. They never began with the first row right by the mizbeach. The carbon tamid was always this. They used the ring of the second row from the mizbeach. You had a total of 4. But in that second row, you're going to have the westernmost ring, and you're going to have the easternmost ring. Now, since the walls surrounding the Beis Hamikdash were tall, and the Talmud was brought very early in the morning, the only way you would shecht it in the sunlight or in the sun rays is that the morning one needed to be shechted the most to the west, because the sun is coming up in the east. The walls are blocking the sunlight, but the ring all the way to the west, that was the ring that was used. Again, it was the second one many reasons. We're going to go also because the Mizbeach, as we know, summer and winter, it's not stam, the sun goes up in the east and it goes down in the west from our perspective. That in itself alternates. Sometimes it's more to the north, sometimes it's more to the south. If it's very much to the south, we didn't want for the Mizbeach itself to cast the shadow on the Makim of the Shechita. So that's why they didn't use the first row near the Mizbeach. And the same thing goes in the afternoon. Where did they shecht it in the afternoon? Just in case they would shecht it very late, they would shecht it all the way to the east. That's the meaning of Shnayim facing the Yom, facing the sun rays. And indeed, Hadohi, the Tanin and Tamon, that's what we learned over there in Mesechtes Talmud. That Talmud shall shachar roya nishchat al keren marav is tzfayis. When we say the word suffering again, it's the second. It's not the first one, right? But it's the second, and it's marav. Because if you put the ring all the way to the west, it gets the sun rays first on the ground, because the sun is coming from the east. And al tabas hashniya, like we said, the second one, not the first one. Keneged hayoim, the purpose is it should be opposite today, meaning it should be in the sunlight. And similarly, Yerushalmi on the opposite side, al keren tzfoinus mizrachis has to be in the north. But here it has to be in the east, all the way in the east. But here again, al tabas shniya. Tabashniya means second row. And let's learn the Pashat Pshat. It should be all in the sunlight because the Mizbeach can cast the shadow. And now the Charedim says that the Gemara really, Ki'ilu, wrote the words again, Shnayim Layoim. Because what we're really doing is we're giving various interpretations for the Shnayim Layoim, even Rabbi Yehuda, that don't hold Pshat Chaloikas Hayim. So this will be the final Shnayim Layoim, that for Hu Sheyehei Yoideya, Eze Mehen Nishchat B'Shachtis, Ve'eze Mehem Nishchat Ba'arvis. Which means that first of all, there was the Lishkas of the Toloim. And in there we had many lamps. Really, the lambs lechatchila should be inspected 4 days prior to it being used as a carbon. But every morning they would take 2 lambs from there. Now you would have thought, Shachris, take 1 lamb, that's the lamb for Shachris. For Bein Arbayim, take another lamb. No, Shnayim Layim. That in the morning they would take 2 lambs. And not just 2, they would have to designate you, Shepsele, Cutie, Shachris, and you, Amincha. Because you need to designate both lambs prior even to the Shachris. So when you take for Shachris, you're not taking 1, you're taking Shnayim Liyoim, Nikudim. All of that just for emphasis that the Shnayim Layoim doesn't need to be learned. Chaloikas Hayoim, the Chachamim learned that. But Rabbi Yehuda has plenty else what to use with those words, and they're not extra. Vital. Says the Gemara Tfilas Mincha. The Mishnah says Tfilas Mincha. The Chachamim say Ad Ha'erev. Rabbi Yehuda says Plag Mincha. Says the Gemara Rabbi Chia in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. First topic will be, what are you to do if Tfilas Mincha but Tfilas Musaf? If the time of Mincha began, when does it begin, Chavra? What we call Mincha Gedoyla. What's Mincha Gedoyla? Right? 6.5 hours into the day, right? Chatzois and 30 minutes. Now you didn't yet have a Musaf, so you can have either Mincha or Musaf. Which one should come first? Like we spoke on in the intro, each side has a svara. Musaf should come first because the chiyuv of Musaf begins right after Shachris. It could begin before Chatzois. It doesn't only begin Bein Harbayim. Mincha, the chiyuv begins later. Mitzat Sheni, Tadav She'ena Tadav, Tadav Koydem. Every day you have to daven mincha. Every day you have to daven mincha. Musaf is not every day. So now, which one should you do? So we have Rabbi Chia in the name of Rabbi Yechanan. Tfilas hamincha is koidemes, and I'm going inside the Charedim. Pirshu hatoisefta mepnei shehi tadira. Afal pishas mana meuchar. They mincha el mesheshoy solomayla umusaf zmanim min aboiche. Nevertheless, that's how powerful is the din of tadav she'ena tadav. Now, when we had that b'shem Rabbi Yechanan, there was something that was not clear initially. We didn't know what was the case of the inquiry for which Rabbi Yechanan paskins that you daven mincha first. What are the 2 sides? Have a bayon meimar. They were analyzing that maybe Rabbi Yechanan's din was only kishe'ein bayoim kedei lispal shnei. This person wakes up, he chaps, oh, I didn't have a musaf, and I didn't have a mincha so late, that until the end of the day, you can only daven one of the two. Maybe there is where Rabbi Yochanan said, maybe, that's tefillah hamincha kedemes, but maybe. Maybe even Rabbi Yochanan will hold tefillas musaf kedemes, like we mentioned, because the chiyuv of musaf came into effect prior to tefillas mincha, so you might as well do musaf and mincha. That is what they thought. However, we had other Amoraim that they had a more specific tradition, the Shem Rabbi Yochanan, and we know that's not what Rabbi Yochanan holds. Rabbi Yochanan holds l'chu'ura, always daven mincha first. Rabbi Zajac, b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, had explicit that vafilu yesh bayoim kedei l'spal shnei. Nevertheless, tfilas mincha kedemes. And not only is that Rabbi Zajac, another Amoraim, Rabbi Nosson bar Toivi, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, also had this clearer tradition, b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, that afilu yesh bayoim kedei l'spal shnei, tfilas mincha kedemes at kedei kach tode v'she'ena tode. So holds Rabbi Yochanan. Now the Gemara is going to, now that we know what Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan is an Amoraim. Frag the Gemara, v'hatani have a brayso. What does Vosak the brayso? Higdim tfilas mincha l'tfilas hamusafim. If one daven mincha before musaf, says the brayso yotz. What does that imply? What is the word higdim? It means we use the words b'di'evet. Here the Yerushalmi is using the words that lisha'ava. If it already happened, which implies ha bat chila, what we would call lechat chila, loy b'da, shouldn't be that way. That's what the Brayso is implying. Now you can't answer higdem tfilas mincha, the tfilas hamusaf, it can't be before chatzos. It has to be after chatzos. If not, how can you daven mincha before musaf? No, we're speaking about after chatzos. We're speaking about a person that didn't daven neither yet. Says the Brayso, if you daven mincha before musaf, is good. You're good. No, how does Rabbi Yochanan learn it? So that's a big kasha. And now the Gemara has a very innovative teretz. Answers the Gemara, what are we talking about? Here, let's go learn the Charedim who brings the Rosh, who explains this answer. Guys, it's mamish the first Charedim under the Gemara. We farenfert. Now we interpret Perush Rosh, the Hachim Yishan. Now let me explain to you what the Gemara is saying. See, Yerushalmi is very hard to understand. It's very big. It's that the Bishas Mincha Ketano Shu Iker Zman Mincha Hu Damayre Rabbi Yochanan V'Amar the Mincha Kodemes. Now we're beginning with a topic, and that's going to lead us into the next topic. The flow is beautiful. Yes, Mincha could be daven from what we call Zman Mincha Gedoyla. The word Gedoyla doesn't go to mincha. The mincha is the same size. Gedoyla means the afternoon is still big. The afternoon is still big. Ketana means the afternoon is still small. As we will learn in a moment, which will be challenged, but we're going to learn that the ideal time to daven mincha is what we call in the zman of mincha ketana, which is 3.5 hours into the afternoon, or 9.5 hours into the day, or 3 hours after the time of mincha gedoyla. Why is that so? We're going to see in a moment. So the people answer, that's when they brought the Talmud, Shel Bein Huarbaim. We're going to challenge that soon. We're going to see it's not exact. It's exact, but it's not exact. But let's go with it. Based on the premise that the main time for Mincha is Mincha Ketana, now we have to go back to Rabbi Yochanan. Yes, there is enough time to daven both. Rabbi Yochanan is speaking even when you can daven both, but he's not speaking about Mincha Gedoyel. That if the main time for Mincha comes, Zman Tefillah means the ideal time to daven. Since it's the Iker time to daven Mincha, you didn't daven, not Musaf and not Mincha, says Rabbi Yochanan. Even though the Chiv of Musaf started earlier, started not before midday, daven Mincha first. But if you are from Mincha Gedoyla until Mincha Ketana, since it's not the Iker time to daven Mincha Ketana, even Rabbi Yochanan is Moida, Musaf comes first. And that is what the Brayso is saying. That even if you were not by the Zman of Mincha Ketana, even you were in the Zman of Mincha Gedoyla, their Taka Musaf should come before Mincha. Even there, B'di'evet, Higdim Tfilas HaMincha, L'Tfilas Musafin, is good. Now everything works. Oh, so let's go back inside here. So answers the Gemara, Pasalav Shlegaz on Tfilah, Gavaldik. Okay. Now, I want to keep on reading the Charedim because not only is there a great flow. Mincha Ketana means that you have another 2.5 hours Shos Maniyos. Means even in winter, where 2.5 hours is less than just 2 hours, how is it not enough time? Mincha was plenty of time. Now I want to say like this. Okay, so guys, we're in the Charedim before we read the next Kahadon. Okay, like we explained, 4 lines under. Says the Charedim, Ulepeirus Zeh. Hold the Maisa, hold Rabbi Shua ben Levi that we didn't learn yet. The Gemara is about to bring Rabbi Shua ben Levi. Why are we bringing this? Lo hoidi enu, because in the Yerushalmi we did not have a certain Tana Braisa Tosefta that they had on the Bavli. They were aware of something that the Chevra here were not aware of. Sheyesh mincha gedoyla uzmana mishei shoy shomechza lomayla. Shalohoyer Yerushalmi Braisa. Shoshoni came ahead of the Bavli. In other words, where do we have from the Tanoim this concept of Zman Hatfila means Mincha Ketana, Mincha Gedolah? Where do you have that? We don't have that. Now, we're going to have in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda says the words Plag HaMincha. Plag HaMincha means half of Mincha. Half of Mincha obviously is from Mincha Ketana. We know that. But in the Bavli, they had a Braisa, right? They had a Tosefta that Charedim brings, that writes that Befedish. Since the Yerushalmi didn't have it, we're trying to make Rabbi Yochanan not contradict the Braisa that we brought. So let's now finish this Amid. Now it's beautiful. Kahadam, let me tell you where I know about this Gedoyla and Katana. That Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Fakid L'Tamidov, he gave an order. He gave a psak for his Talmidim. That what? In Haveluchoin Aristoid. If you have an Aristoid, and Aristoid means a banquet. We already learned this in the Yerushalmi, that there are certain activities that one should not do, samuch lemincha. The Gemara is not even going to say what that means. Samuch lemincha means 30 minutes prior. One of the examples is that if you are going to enter a banquet, an aristoin, not a snack, you have to also understand the culture. Maybe people here in America, they eat very quick, 80 meals a day, it's not shy. But if you go into a banquet, means that when people sat down to eat, they sat down and they ate for a long time. So the Mishnah says many activities that one should not do samach lemincha. If they began it, lav dafka, they have to stop it. We're speaking about someone who's going to finish their banquet. They're going to finish their banquet. There'll be time to daven mincha, but it's not nice. Wait 30 minutes and then go into the banquet. So let's go back. If you have a banquet, and the day is already midday. Midday is 30 minutes before Mincha Gedoyla. Right before you entered the banquet, that's the pshat of Samach L'Mincha turning to Daf Mem Daled Amud Beis. So that is what the Mishnah says. Don't begin that activity. It's already from midday. Even though we have in our Mishnah, Flaga Mincha means half of Mincha Ketana. So this, in other words, in our Mishnah, we see that Mincha means 3:30 p.m., 3:30 Shos Manos. That's Mincha Ketana. If that would be the only Mincha, then Rabbi Shua ben Levi would allow his Talmidim to begin a banquet midday, because it's more than 30 minutes prior to Mincha. The fact that Rabbi Shua ben Levi applied the din of Samach LeMincha even to 12:30, that's the source in the Yerushalmi that there is a concept of davening Mincha even bisman Mincha Gedoyla. Beautiful. Tehevi matzloin the Mincha sa daven Mincha adeloy tiskon prior to entering. Now, obviously, Rabbi Shua ben Levi is not telling them to daven Mincha 12 o'clock. If it's 12 o'clock and you are going to enter the banquet, so you are already samuch lemincha, don't enter the daven mincha. Daven mincha, not now. Wait 30 minutes and then daven mincha and then enter the banquet. That's the source of the Yerushalmi of the concept of a zman mincha gedoyla. But the ikir zman tefillah of mincha is 3:30, and that's actually now you get the flow. So comes Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda argues with the Chachamim. The Chachamim hold that tefillah mincha ad ha'erev. Rabbi Yehuda says at plaga mincha and kamu plaga mincha, and the Gemara is quoting a toisefta. This is not words of Tanoim. This is not a Amoraim. important just to get the next part of the Gemara. Answers the Gemara quoting a Tosefta. What is Plaga Mincha? Achas esti shois chatzanaviyah. 10 hours and 3/4. 11 hours minus a quarter. No, it's all based on a given. Mincha, the Ikin Mincha is Mincha Katana, which is 3.5 hours after noon, which means it's only 2.5 hours prior to the end of the day. Mincha Katana is 2.5 hours, Maniyos prior to the end of the day. Plag means half. Half of that means from 2.5 or 1.25. 1.25 hours Zmaniyos prior to the end of the halachic day. That's Plaga Mincha. That's what Rabbi Yehuda holds. Only until then it's day. According to Rabbi Yehuda, after that it's already considered halachically night. Now, all of that is based on the premise. If it's an hour and a quarter is a half of 2.5. Meaning, Mincha Katana is 2.5. That's a Tosefta. Now, the Gemara is going to challenge that. Now, everyone quotes the Mishnah Pesachim. You think about it. And the Gemara, instead of using that as a source, is going to use the Mishnah Pesachim as a kasha. The Mishnah Pesachim tells us when de facto would they bring the Talmud shel Bein Harbayim. Yes, Bein Harbayim means in the afternoon. And theoretically, you can bring, and sometimes they would actually bring the Talmud shel Bein Harbayim right at the first time possible. Zrizin Magdim al mitzvahs. But there's something else. There's a mitzvah say based on the words Oleha Hashleim Kol HaKarbanei Skulam. Oleha means that the last carbon, with the exception of the carbon Pesach, and then sometimes you have other exceptions. In the Chusei Kapara, we'll speak about the general rule. The last carbon in the Beis Hamikdash is the Talmud shel Bein Harbayim. After you bring the Talmud shel Bein Harbayim, Oleha Hashleim, you can't bring anything else. People want to bring karbanes shachit. People want to bring karbanes. So that's why in the Beis Hamikdash they would not bring it right in the first opportunity, which would be 12:30. They would not do that. When would they do that? So that would depend. There was the normal, then there was exceptions connected to the carbon Pesach. So let's quote that Mishnah. Asks the Gemara, this is a Minakash. How can you say, you Tana, you Braisa, you Tosefta, that Plaga Mincha is an hour and a quarter prior, called half. Double that is 2.5. 2.5 would be what we would call 9.5 hours into the day, right? 3.5 hours in the afternoon. 6 in the morning is 9.5 into the day. How can you say that? In over there, we learned the Mishnah that in the Bavli is on Daf Nun Ches, Tamid Nishchat. When would they normally shech the carbon Tamid? When would they begin? Not 9.5 hours, but B'Shmoino Mechza, 8.5 hours into the day, 2:30 Shazmaniyos. Happens to be, now remember, when you shech the carbon, you know how many things happened? There was the Shchita, the Kabbalah, the Hilach, and the Zrika. But then, hold on, then you have to dismember the carbon. And ultimately, the end was to burn a carbon. Talmud is a carbon oil. All of it is burnt. All of it, when did they burn it up? 1 hour later. If you remember, we learned this together in Masechtas Talmud. It wasn't stam. They brought it up on the ram. They stopped in the middle of the ram. They put the pieces on the ram. They went to daven. What we call davening, it wasn't exactly the Shemona Esrei. There was a lot that happened. It took 1 hour. The avodah of a Talmud, both in the morning and in the afternoon, was 1 hour. So they began at 8:30, 8.5 hours, 2:30 p.m. Vikariv, when was the fact brought? That's now the work. Why would they? Now there are exceptions. Why did they do it? Why not Zrizin? Because Aleha Hashleim Kala Karbanis. What's the one famous exception? Carbon Pesach. Carbon Pesach, which is brought on this 14th, can only be brought after the Talmud shel Bein Harbayim. Carbon Pesach, it's not one for the whole community. It's one for a group. What did we learn in Pesachim? I think that we learned up to 2 million karbanos, some crazy number, whether it's a guzma or not. I mean, sometimes there were many. So there they would bring the Talmud earlier. And Mishcha, and of Pesachim, there was even an exception to this, but we don't have to go that far. There, Nishchat b'Shavuot Mechza, they anticipated the Talmud shel Bein Harbayim. They brought it 1 hour earlier. 7.5 hours is 1:30 p.m. Shos Maniyos. They didn't rush it. They began earlier. Right? You want to daven Yom Kippur, you want to leave earlier. You want to have they begin earlier. You don't rush the davening. So it took 1 hour. And another detail, Bein B'Choil, Bein B'Shabbos, because a carbon Pesach is considered sibur enough that has to be brought on a specific time that it's doiche Shabbos without getting. Now, we already had this, I think it was on Daf Aleph or on Daf Beis, that in the Yerushalmi, the words boye doesn't mean what it means in the Bavli, at least doesn't always mean. In the Bavli, the word aboya means a two-sided question. Have an inquiry. Doesn't mean A, doesn't mean B. Sometimes boy means kasha. So Rabbi Yirmiyah boy, now he speaks out the kasha. That hacha here in this Tosefta that we began by defining plaga mincha, hour and a quarter before the end of the day. At Ovid mincha, half means what's double of 1 1/4? 2.5. At Ovid mincha, you're telling me that the normal time of mincha, what we also had before, explaining Rabbi Yechanan, that the real zman for mincha, ideal is mincha ketana, and that is shtei shtois umechza. But the kasha is why. So you would say, what do you mean why? We just learned the Mishnah Pesachim. When would they burn the carbon tamid, David? 9.5 hours. But the Gemara doesn't even look at that. They shachted it. You have to look at the zman hashchita. You have to look at the zman hashchita. Don't look at the zman of hakrava. And I can tell you more better. When you tell a person we are bringing the carbon tamid, you can even argue that the moment they have Kabbalah Saddam, that's the beginning of the hakrava. Just because it took them an hour to complete it, we have to go by the beginning. So l'chayra mincha ketana should be 8.5 hours in the day, which means 3.5 hours before the end of the day. And accordingly, half of that should be plaga mincha. Why wouldn't plaga mincha be half of that? It's amazing because sometimes when people read the psichim without this kasha, they say, perfect. The Mishnah says it was brought 9.5 hours in. We're saying, what are you? It was brought 8.5 hours. It was geshacht in them. Why are you going at the end? Go after the beginning. And Omar Rabbi Yossi, we don't have in the Bible. Tell you more than that. I think it was in Psachim. Toys was asked the question, why is our tefillas mincha called mincha? Why is it called mincha? Where does the word mincha come from? Why not tefillas bein harbayim? And you're going to see, and he gives two answers. And the Gemara, and he doesn't quote this. That's a nacha kasha that they have on the Toysus. Omar Rabbi Yossi, a whole new chiddush over here, which is amazing. We also had yesterday, the last time we learned. What did we learn? That the three karbana, the three tefillos, keneged avos. Then we had the last thing the Gemara gave. The Gemara gave 3 reasons. The last of the 3 in the Yerushalmi, or the second from the Babli, is tamid, and the chalav and the evarim u'pedarim. The Gemara has a big statement. Rabbi Yossi says mincha is not keneged tamid. It's keneged the ketores that was brought after the tamid, which is amazing. Now it works because since the ketores can only be brought after they brought the tamid shel bein harbayim, now it works. When would they finish the sacrifice of the afternoon tamid? The Mishnah says, I'm sorry, it took 1 hour. 9.5 hours. Immediately afterwards, they would bring the ketores. Mincha is connected to the ketores. This is amazing. Now this explains why do we say that Eliyahu Hanavi Leinana Ela b'tfilas mincha. According to the Yerushalmi, we get it. The highest level of connection to God is ketores. The highest, actually, the word ketores means a knot. The chat katirna is katarna, as Chassidus explains. You have the outer fire, you have the menorah fire. There's everything changes. The whole mincha changes. Amar Rabbi Yossi, lo yehukshu tfilas hamincha l'tamid shel bein harbayim. He says clear, not what you thought until now. What is it compared to? Ella liketoires. And why Tam in Yerushalmi means what's the source? Tehillim kuf mem aleph tikoin tefilasi, may my prayers be established. Ketoires lifonecha, like the ketoires that is brought before you. Masas kapai, the lifting of my hands. Now look at the words over here. Minchas erev. How great is that? You see the word mincha? That answers the mincha. I know before mincha, but how beautiful it is. And the masas kapai minchas erev. So the pshat of the pasuk is 2 different things. My tefillah should be like the ketores. My hand should be like the afternoon mincha. Good, but the tefillah is ketores. So now, Adarabah, say sha'achas li'sukay. The Mishnah says that you have to give an hour for the asik of the carbon. The Mishnah says at 8:30 they did the shechita. When did they finish it? 9:30. 9:30 in the day, which is 3:30. Now it works. Therefore, you have to make mincha only 2 hours umechza, which is the ideal time for mincha. So now when Rabbi Yehuda says plag means half of that. How great is that? Yes, we did, because the Mishnah didn't finish learning The Gemara here didn't quote the whole Mishnah. I think if it was either Friday or Shabbos, I think if it's Friday, on Friday, when Erev Pesach is on Friday, dear, not only did they have to shecht it, but I think they already needed to roast it. Eating it is only after, but they needed to roast it, so they needed even more time. That means it was once a year where they would take and bring the Karban Tamid. One scenario exactly. That's the Mishnah. Okay, beautiful. Let's see how far we can get. Now we have a machlekes Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda. We learned the Charedim that says that for regarding this machlokes you can paskin like whoever you want. So if you have that option, when should you daven mincha? When is the ideal time for mincha? Rabbi Yosi ben Chanina says the Gemara im dim tumechama. He would daven during the redness of the sun, which means, says the Charedim, when the sun is about to set. I'm reading aside. And why is that? You want to have Yerushalmi for the entire day. How does that work? Says the Charedim, right? We're in the third or fourth end of the narrow lines, as it says in Tehillim, Yira'ucha im shemesh. What does it mean, Yira'ucha? You should be seen with the sun. Darshins, the Charedim, he brings from Bavli that Yira'ucha al pitrush doesn't mean you should be seen, but it means you should express, you should tap into your Yirah Shamayim. When should you have the fear of God? Im shemesh. V'darshin and bei kishi Yira'ucha im shemesh. Ta'inu tefila Yira'ucha im shemesh. Why is that? So he says beautiful. He says when a person davens, they're being makabel, the real Moira Shamayim. I'll go more than that. Now that we said that there is karbonos and there's ktoiris, the highest level of Yerushalmi, Yiras bittul, the highest level of bittul is the ktoiris. I'm just bekitzer. What Chassidus says is like this: is that the fire of the outer altar was a noisy fire, it made noise, crackled. Why did it make noise? Because the moisture in the fats of the animals are the enemy of fire. So when fire and water get together, fire and fat, when lahavdil, when you make a barbecue, if the fatter the meat, the more the fire is dancing around. Where do we have a calmer fire? In the menorah. Olive oil burned very calm, very peacefully. Which fire is even more than the menorah? The ketoides. Why? Because by the menorah, even though there's oil that gives itself over, with bittul, with yira, doesn't fight it, but there's oil and there's fire. They're separated. The oil is not burning, actually. The oil is burning through the wick. The oil itself didn't have fire. Where do you have that both the fuel and the fire merge into one? Only by the ketoides. What burned by the ketoides? The fuel and the fire became united. Ketoides means to become one. And why is the outer fire the most noisy? Is because, the fire is going to win, but there's resistance, which means there's a lack of bittul. The more resistance, when people daven Shemona Esrei, the people that struggle, and even if they mean it, that's because there's resistance. They're fighting their own animal. People that daven like tzaddikim, they barely move. It's because there's no resistance, because there's a higher level of bittul. So where do you have the highest level of bittul? Now that we said that mincha's ketoides, by mincha. So he wanted to be. When does the day begin for a yid? At night, right before the day begins, which is mincha. Begin with an act of Yerushalmi, which is davening mincha ketoides. Really, in the Beis Hamikdash, ketoides was done. We said in 2 hours and a half. But the reason why Rabbi Yosi ben Chanina didn't daven mincha ketana, he didn't do that. He did it at the end of the day. One answer is because Yira'ucha im shemesh, the first line under the Charedim, Yira'ucha im shemesh dahainu kol hemshech hayoyim. You want for the whole day, you should be imbued with Moira Shamayim. What does the whole day mean? Much after. For a Jew, day begins at night. So when should you daven mincha? Right before night. What we call a belza mincha. Daven mincha the last moment that you could. Because when you finish mincha, you begin the new day. You want to begin the new day coming off ketoides. Ketoides is yira ucha, the highest level of yira, the highest level of bittul. It's amazing. Back inside the Gemara. Nothing but that. Mincha is the ketoides. Rabbi Yosi ben Chanina. Yehei chelki. Not only he was mispalel. Rabbi Yosi ben Chanina himself, he wanted that. he would pray to God, may my portion be imam espalim, those who daven mincha, im dem dumecham, when there's the redness of the sky. The redness of the sky is mamish. We know that by shkia, that's when the sky turns red. And my tam, interesting. So he brings the Charedim brought the Yerucham, but that he brought from the Bible. And now we have in the Yerushalmi. Al zois yispalol kol chasidei lecha le'es mitzoy. You take Hasidim are good at this. Hasidim daven mincha, the later the better. That a chasid davens le'es mitzoy. Now le'es mitzoy literally means at a special time. No, the mitzoy al pidrush means when you squeeze, like mitzui hadam. When the day is being squeezed out, when is the day being squeezed out? At the end of the day, when the sky is already becoming red, it's like we're squeezing the last drop of the sun. When you're wringing out the day, says the Charedim, that when it's ending, the nimtzad al kenom is beyach. Amazing. Another says back in the Gemara, Achavoy, the imei de Ravada, right, the uncle of Ravada, the maternal uncle of Ravada. Here we have different nuschos. We're going to go with the Charedim, which doesn't say mitzayetz, but mitzayar. Have a mitzayar gulsei the Rav v'tzoy merabo. He would be the one who had the merit to guard. Mitzayar means to guard the cloak. The cloak will mean the talis, the big talis of Rav himself on the great fast on Yom Kippur. In other words, we finish Musaf. When do you begin Mincha? So, in Chabad Solo, the minig is we begin Mincha very late. So we're always rushing. But there's an inyan in that. In other words, once we establish that there's an inyan to daven Mincha, towards the latest that you could, so even on Yom Kippur, you have no Chana'ila. What did he do? He would remove his talis when he finished Musaf. He would give it over to the lucky uncle of Ravada, and he was in charge of making sure that the talis is nice when Mincha is going to begin, when he put his talis back on. And Amalei, Rav would tell him, Kad techeme shimsha bereis dikla, when the suns are on top of the palm trees. Guys, we're talking about almost before the end of the day. Then Tehavli Gulsai, give me back my cloak, my talis. Then and the Gemara says the Shimsha Bereis Diklan Tamon. Okay, now, okay, we're going to start this. I know it's we have 2 minutes, 3 minutes, perfect for especially to make him nervous. Rabbi Blau. So now, guys, there's Minakotza la Kotza, how to read the next slides. Mamish. We're going to first go with Haredim. And we're going to learn, we have to say the opposite of the Pnei Moshe, the opposite. Big machloek, big. Okay, first of all, we established that even though Mincha, what did we learn today? Mincha Gedoyla, B'di'evet, you can daven Mincha. B'di'evet. And there, if you have Musaf and Mincha, daven Musaf. Because it's not, the Iker's man Mincha is 2.5 hours before. That's when they brought the Ketoides. Yet, the Chassid davens Mincha at the end of the day. Even on Yom Kippur. You start as late as you could. Now the question is, let's go with the Charedim first. The Charedim learns as a given, that at the end of whose day, wherever you are, the Shimsha, the statement, according to the Charedim, it's not a kasha, there's no teretz. The Gemara is making a statement that the Shimsha bereis dikla taman, that when the sun, guys, where did Rav was in Surah, Rav was in Bavel. So when the sun is on top of the palm trees in Bavel, happens to be that even here it's still daytime, which means it turns out that and let's read inside the Charedim, the statement, 3 lines before the bottom, that the Shimshim is the Kavan, Kish Hashem is Bavel, which is Ba'oim Koshel Oilam. Bavel is very deep, it's very low, right? So therefore, Shkia there is earlier. Yamam Huach Eretz Yisrael, Bikuberum Shel Oilam. So Lamdanu, the last line of the Charedim. The mitzvah is follow im the dumechama hakoy lefi amakim shemisala mehem yad ispal. It's where you are. Because if Rav wanted to daven with the dumechama of Eretz Yisrael, then when he davened there, it wasn't the dumechama in Eretz Yisrael. The sun was still high, much higher up. Eretz Yisrael is more to the west. More to the west. It's shkias later. That's now look inside the way the Pnei Moshe learns the opposite. We have to read inside the Pnei Moshe. We still have a minute. That the Shimsha bereis dikla taman imam mahu acher. Kain Sarach Leimer, and the Pnei Moshe says, no, the Gemara is asking Akash. That since you have to daven in Dimdum Mechama, you know when? In Eretz Yisrael. Now we're going to the real Hasidic Rebbes. They daven who knows what time. You have to know what time is it in Israel. The Gemara is making that since you have to, if the English will do Mechama, so when should he have davened? Gemara is asking, should have davened after it's dark. Mincha, look inside. The Kushi, that Hawkish Hashem is basically the bubble, Yom Gadol, Adayin Kan Beretz Yisrael. Still there, because I'm Rabbi Yechanan, that bubble is Zuta Shel Oilam. Shiva Mitzula V'Tachei Abba. So the Akasha, the Gemara is asking a question. How was Rav allowed to daven when it's the sun is the heavens are reddened in Bavel, Vu beBavel, V'Haloi Zezman beBavel, ain't even doing the Mechama. Answers the Gemara, no. That when it's the Mechama in Eretz Yisrael, what time is it in Eretz Yisrael? Plaga Mincha. That Rav did not go like Rabbi Yossi ben Chanina. Rav davened in Plaga Mincha. But who's Plaga Mincha? The Holy Land's Plaga Mincha. So you don't think that he davened in Dum Mechama. If it would be that, he would daven at night. Beautiful. It's Akasha. The Omar Rabbi Yechanan, quickly daf mem dalud, now we're late. The pasuk in Yeshaya, that he who said to the deep, dry up, where is the deep? Bubble. Bubble is called the lowest part of the world. We'll stop over here. It's interesting. Today, you would ask a person, why Yeshki in Eretz Yisrael later? Because it's towards the west. The Gemara knew that. But on top of that, there's another nuance. Bubble was very low. Eretz Yisrael, speaking of Yerushalmi, Yerushalmi is very high. When you are in a mountain, Shkia is even later. Point is that according to the Pnei Moshe, the Gemara is concluding, some people daven in Dum Mechama. Some daven the Plaga Mincha, but if you want to daven Plaga Mincha and you live to the east, you have to daven according to the Zman of Eretz Yisrael. Rav daven according to many Hasidic Rebbes Takat use this Gemara. I have no doubt with their Zman